Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and today we're going to go over understanding the difference between repairs and improvements for real estate investors. And I know this is a commonly misunderstood concept, so I'm going to break it down for you. So let's dive right on in. Number one, this is for investment properties. So if you are doing improvements on your home or repairs on your home, and it's where you live and you're not renting it out, then you don't get any deduction. You're never going to get a write-off or a tax deduction as a result. You could add it to your basis of your property. So say I bought a home for $200,000 and I do a bunch of improvements on it. Let's say I add a deck, or maybe I replace the roof, something along those lines. I can add that to my basis of my home, but I am not getting a tax deduction for doing it. This is just for investment properties. So I want to get that right out of the way. So for investment properties, there is a big distinction between repairs and improvements. Repairs, we get an immediate deduction. I get to write it off right away, versus an improvement, I'm adding it to the basis of the property and I'm writing it off over its useful life. Biggest example I can give you is if, for example, you replace a roof. So one example could be there's a hole in the roof and I fix it. That is called a repair. I get to deduct that. The roof is bad, so I replace it. So the repair I just fixed. In fact, the easiest way to say this is a repair keeps your property in working condition, whereas an improvement improves the value of the property or its useful life. So when I replace the entire roof, what's really happened is I've ended the old roof and I take a deduction based off of whatever value that roof has compared to the house for its useful life. So if the value of the house, when I purchased it and that roof was $20,000 and I've depreciated $5,000 of it so far, when I replace that roof, I get a $15,000 deduction, the difference between what I've deducted and what I have not. But then whatever I spent on it, let's say I spent $30,000 on the new roof, I am not getting that as a deduction. I'm writing that off over 27 and a half years if it's residential, 39 years if it's non-residential, right? That's how this stuff works. It has a huge impact. And so it really comes down to being a very critical question. And I'm going to go over some of the safe harbors for you. There's a couple few. And I'll make sure that you understand, here's the areas where we can always call something a repair. Here's something where we're going to call it an improvement. Improvements, we add to basis and depreciate over a longer period of time. Repairs, we write off right away. So let's go over it. So number one, a repair, as we already said, is just fixing something. That's the easiest way for you to think about it. I am restoring something to its condition so that it can operate. I'm not restoring the whole property. Like restoration is one of those trick words where it can be used to either. But I'm doing a repair. It's to keep it in its working condition. In fact, I oftentimes use the term maintenance because you're going to see it fall if it shows up in one of our safe harbors. But if I am just addressing wear and tear of something and keeping it functional, so for example, hole in the roof, I'm fixing the roof, I'm just keeping it functional, I'm not replacing the whole roof, I'm just fixing it, then that's going to be a repair. Whatever the amount is, I get to deduct it. I'll go over the safe harbors, but I just want to make sure that you are clear. If it's a repair, it doesn't matter. If I paint the house, hey, I have a rental property and I paint it, that's a repair. I'm keeping it up to snuff. I am not improving the value of the house by doing that paint. Paint's almost always going to be a repair, is I'm keeping it up to snuff. I'm just putting another layer of paint on it. I'm not tearing it out and redoing it. Now, improvements add or prolong the useful life, add to or prolong the useful life of that property. It could also, there's really going to be three big categories, and I'm going to write them down for you. So let's just do this. We're going to go and we're going to say repairs equals maintain, fix. Keep it kind of simple. I just want to keep the property in its working condition. So maintain, fix, working condition. When we start talking about improve, then I'm going to be like, we're going to expand its useful life. So I'm going to say adds value. Prolong your useful life. And then there is three terms that we use to help categorize the improvement, so it's very easy for you to follow. Number one is betterment. Number two is adaptation for a new use. Adapt, I'll just use that. Number three is going to be complete restoration. In other words, basically almost like replacing a whole section. So let's kind of go over that. So what is a betterment? A betterment is when you ameliorate a material defect or a condition on the property. So we are making the property better. So the easy one is like restoring the roof, right? If I fix the roof, I'm not making the property better. If I replace the roof, I'm making it better. And so I'm going to add to the value of that property. That is going to be an improvement, clearly. If I'm just fixing something, it's not adding value to the property as a whole. Like, in other words, when I'm working at a system, like an electrical system, if I just fix broken wires or something that's not working and I just repair it, then I am going to get to write that off, no matter what the amount is. Again, I'll go over the safe harbors here in a second. I'm going to get to write that off as an immediate deduction. If I replace the entire electric system and literally I'm doing a restoration project for the entire thing, then that is going to be an improvement. So restorations, quite often you look at things like, hey, there was something broken in a property before I bought it and then I fix it. That's going to be an improvement. Sometimes, you get rehab projects and you fix up the building. Those aren't going to be repairs. Right? Those are going to actually be improvements in many of those situations. We've got to be careful. Also, we want to put it into service before we do a lot of it. And so a restoration is bringing something back to its new condition after the end of its useful life. So if we have 5-year property and we're making it new again, chances are that's going to qualify potentially as an improvement. And now if you're doing cost sags, you're not really going to care because you're going to write it off much faster anyway. But you get the idea. Is I'm taking something that's done and I am bringing it back to new, and I'm making it basically, hey, I'm making it a lot better. So there you go. Adaptation's really easy. When you adapt, I'm changing it to a new or a different use than it's currently in. So if I start doing adaptations to a property, for example, I take a residence and then I change it over into a boarding house, or I change it over into a hotel or something, I'm probably looking at improvements unless I can fall under one of the safe harbors. And there's really 3 safe harbors that we're going to look at. Like, I'm not going to sit here and dink on these things too much. It really comes down to facts and circumstances, so you want to talk to somebody, but these are the general principles. So if I am just fixing something of a major component, which could be everything from HVAC to the electrical system, to the plumbing system, to the structure of the building, maybe all the windows, maybe the roof, all those things. If I'm replacing a whole bunch of those things, chances are that's an improvement. Whereas if I'm doing 1s or 2s, I'm going to more than likely be a repair. So that's something to consider. Now here's the safe harbors. Safe harbor number 1 is the de minimis safe harbor. It's what everybody talks about when you talk to your accountant, which is a $2,500 safe harbor that anytime I spend $2,500 or less on an item, I can call it a repair and deduct it immediately. So even if it's arguably an improvement, it's a repair so long as it's underneath that de minimis. Now, if I do a bunch of de minimis repairs on a single component, like I do $2,500 for 5 windows and it's all the windows in the house, that's not going to fly. They're going to add them all up together and that's an improvement. I replaced an entire component. I fixed it. I just restored the house, right? But if I am just doing this periodically and I'm just doing it to maintain and I'm fixing things and I'm spreading it out over years, I'm going to be into the repair. And especially if I'm in the safe harbor, hey, hey, I did $2,500 on the electric system, period. Great, safe harbor, it's a repair, I'm taking the deduction. I spend $10,000 on the electric system. Now I have to do the analysis. Is it a repair or is it an improvement? And I'm looking at it saying, no, actually, it was a routine maintenance. It just happened to be really expensive. I had some things go out that were pricey, and all I did is I got it restored back to the way that it should be operating. I didn't restore it to as new. I didn't replace the whole dang thing. I didn't take the whole thing out, but I fixed something. Then even that would still qualify as a repair under those circumstances. So there's the de minimis safe harbor of $2,500. And if you have financial statements that are not for a tax reason, in other words, I'm doing it for a loan or maybe a reporting, maybe you're doing a Reg D or something like that, and you have reporting requirements for audited financials or whatnot. If you're doing it for some other reason than tax, then that number goes up to $5,000. So for most of us, just regular folks here, we're just doing it at the $2,500. Just know that there is that $5,000. There's also a small taxpayer exclusion, which is if the improvement is worth $1 million or less, then I could use $10,000 a year or 2% of whatever the value of the basis, whatever that basis was, whatever's less. So if you have a $400,000 property, 400 times 2, so 8,000, then it'll be $8,000 a year of regular maintenance. I can just immediately deduct. It's just routine maintenance, small taxpayer, routine maintenance, it doesn't even matter the level, but small taxpayer, I can write off up to $8,000 a year, and you count your safe harbor deductions of the $2,500, the de minimis, against that amount. So I can't do safe harbor for $12,000 and small taxpayer for $8,000. The whatever I spend on the safe harbor, so if it's $12,000, counts against the $8,000. Again, I'm using a basis of $400,000. 2% of that would be $8,000. I can write off $8,000 as repair a year. If I go above that, then I'm going to need to fit under one of the other thresholds, which is either I'm going to be using the de minimis safe harbor. So it's generally per component, per invoice. So if I'm fixing let's say I did some repair on the roof, did some repair on the electric, fixed some other things, maybe flooring, maybe windows, and at the end of the day, I added up to $12,000. I'm probably going to use the de minimis safe harbor, and it's an election you make on your tax return. And I'm saying, hey, here's the pieces, here's the ones that I used for that amount. If you didn't want to mess with that, and let's just say you spent $5,000 a year and you have a $400,000 property, you could elect to just use the small taxpayer safe harbor and just say, hey, I'm less than $1 million, it's a $400,000. These repairs are like anything underneath 2% is going to be okay. The IRS is going to say, all right, that's a repair, right? You're obviously using maintenance. You're starting to figure this out, I hope. Right? Big projects equal improvements unless you could fall under one of these other categories, unless you could show that it was clearly a repair of something that busted, that had to be fixed on that property. But if you are spending more than 2%, you're probably in that area where, okay, I got to figure out a way to make this into a repair. We're getting into it's probably going to be betterment, adaptation, or a complete restoration, right? All right, so we have the de minimis safe harbor. We have the small business safe harbor, and then we have the routine maintenance safe harbor. So if you plan on replacing something before the end of its useful life more than once, so twice during its useful life, and it's common, and it's reoccurring, and you're doing that, that is routine maintenance. That is going to be repair, because you're obviously having to swap it out, maintain it, and by maintaining it, I mean you're having to fix it twice during its useful life. So if something has a 15-year useful life, if you anticipate that you're going to have to do it every 5 years, you're going to have to do whatever you're doing to keep it operating, then the IRS is going to say, that's clear, okay, that's routine maintenance, that's a repair. We're not going to make you add it to basis. IRS just looks at it, facts and circumstances. I know some of you guys are saying, geez, Toby, that's clear as mud. No, you're starting to see what the IRS is looking at. If you're doing something where you're doing a $30,000, $40,000 project on a house that's $400,000, you're really looking at improvement, right? Unless you could be very direct and create the narrative that shows that this was not a complete betterment. This was like an adaptation. If we're just using it as a single family, we're not changing its use, then we're fine. We're not moving and adding square footage. We're not adding more useful life. But if we are really just maintaining that home, then it doesn't matter the amount. You're going to just have a little more higher burden to cross over, but you're going to address it. And you're going to say, all right, these are the things, these are the reasons, and we're going to document it as such that this is a repair. And then your accountant can take that, put it on your return, and sign your return in good faith. So let me reiterate, repair versus maintenance. A repair is really to fix something, to maintain it as long as you're maintaining it more than once during its useful life. So again, you have to break your property down into its components, but things like the appliances is every 5 years, carpeting is 5 years, window coverings 5 years, some things like cabinets maybe 5, sometimes 7, land improvements might be 15 years, but if you're always having like, hey, you know what, I know I'm going to have to replace the darn carpet every 2 years. Okay, that's routine maintenance now. You can write that off as long as you're doing it, right? If you're not going to do that, then you might just say, hey, I just want to bonus depreciate it and write it all off. And yeah, I'm not. If you're not changing that carpet out, but maybe every fifth year, then you've already done your cost seg, you've already isolated it out. You're just going to write that off over 5 years with bonus depreciation. Sometimes you can write it off in 1 year. Anyway, it's the same difference, right? It's going to get you to the same place. If I'm adding improvements to the property, clearly. Like if I'm adding a room or whatnot, clearly that's going to be an improvement unless you could fall under one of those safe harbors. But again, repair, fixing stuff, improvements is adding useful life. It's betterment, it's adaptation, it's complete restoration, bringing it back to new from a condition. Or if I buy a property and it already had something, a defect, and I fix it, then that's going to be considered an improvement as well, right? So fixing something like a roof at a property that you buy, you're going to want to be under one of those de minimis safe harbors, right? You want to be the 2,500 or routine maintenance. You're never going to get that on a roof, so it's going to have to be that de minimis. It's going to have to fit in there. Possibly you'd be able to use the small taxpayer and be able to get there. But for the most part, those ones you're going to have to fit in one of those categories. Otherwise, it's going to be considered an improvement. You buy something that is, beater house, and I put $50,000 into it, you have a very high threshold to pass over to get it to be treated as anything other than improvement. In fact, just sitting there, most accountants are going to say there's no way. There might be some things that you could categorize as long as you have good records as repair, and the rest of it's just going to be depreciated over time. I hope that helps. And then just remember that your personal residence, you don't get to write off any of those things. There's no such thing as a repair that is deductible on a personal residence unless you converted it and you're using it like renting out a room or an ADU or something like that. Then I can start looking at that particular area of the property. But otherwise, like if I'm just doing repairs on my house, I never get to write it off. If anything, I'm going to take that and add it to the basis. But with your private residence, you also have that 121 exclusion on your capital gains. Chances are you're not going to pay tax when you sell it anyway. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves, right? So don't use it. You can't use it on your personal residence. You're using it on investment properties. When you're looking at these things on investment property, repair is really just fixing. Improvements is adding value, useful life, complete restoration, or adapting it for some other use. All those things fall into that category of improvement. So if you're ever at a loss, just start thinking about it logically. See if you can get underneath one of the safe harbors, the small taxpayer safe harbor, or the de minimis, or the routine maintenance safe harbors. All of those work consistently over time, and you're just going to have to make sure that you're communicating with your accountant and that you guys are doing this deliberately. Now you know. If you believe somebody would benefit from this information, please share it with them. Otherwise, like and subscribe. If you have any comments, by all means, leave them down below. If you want me to cover a different topic, put your ideas down below. Always looking for good ideas.